You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. I'm also excited. On October 15th, just a few days ago, my new book and fourth novel was published here in the United States. I do think it's the best fiction I've ever done, and I had hard-won glee in writing it. Yes. It's a story about storytelling and storytellers, a set of stories like nested Russian dolls that resonate and fit with each other, and with the characters of a storyteller and a listener who constitute the framework. But when the membrane between the stories and frame begins to be permeable, then do we know who is where? The title, parallax, means the effect whereby the position or direction of an object appears to differ when viewed from different positions. I just wanted to write the kind of book that would be comfort food in these troubled times. A storybook, but for grown-ups. Well, I must have done something sort of right, because that truly great writer, Ursula K. Le Guin, the late Ursula K. Le Guin, read it in manuscript and put her stamp on it, saying, "The more I read, the more I did not want to stop." It's no longer necessary to pre-order Parallax because it's now available at booksellers everywhere, online and off. And if the mainstream book sites, by chance, are momentarily sold out and waiting for more copies, as actually Amazon was last week, then try ipgbooks.com. And thanks for allowing me to boast about my newest offspring. Meanwhile, on this offspring, we have a show today bursting at its seams, so full of goodies it is. True, our Inside the Headlines segment and our Surrealism Corner segment are now in such a Venn diagram overlapped state that we could refer to them as Inside the Surrealism Corner. A thrilling guest graces this week's conversation with her presence, the investigative journalist who unearthed and then pursued the story behind Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking and abuse of young girls case, and she heated up that cold case file until at least an approximation of justice came to the survivors. And Fighting Words today is one filled with an idea or two that I hope overlaps with one or two of yours. So we better get started, and that means going inside the headlines. I have to start with this. How about that Nancy Pelosi? Signature red dress, usual heels so high it hurts me just to look at them, but she's perfectly balanced on them. Always polite, never raising her voice. And there she is at the White House, finger pointed at the president, on her feet, owning the room full of seated, cowering men. How about that Nancy Pelosi? How about her, huh? In her honor, we'll focus on the U.S. this week. How many times have you flown in an aircraft that had a woman pilot who was African American? Not a common occurrence, huh? Women make up just over 7% of all pilots in the U.S., according to the most recent data from the Federal Aviation Administration. Numbers are, as usual, even worse when disaggregated for black women, who, based on recent estimates, make up fewer than 1% of all pilots holding airline transport, pilot, commercial, military, and/or certified flight instructor licenses. Quote, "Out of almost 13,000 pilots at United, about 900 of us are women," says United Captain Teresa Claiborne. She is credited with being the first African-American female pilot in the U.S. Air Force in 1982. Quote, Of those 900 women, she continues, 17 of us are black, and right now we have only 2 black women captains. Now, there are groups who are working on this, the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, Women in Aviation, and recently a new one called Sisters of the Sky, of which Claiborne is president. Since Sisters of the Sky started 3 years ago, it expanded to include a network of more than 100 black female pilots and aspiring pilots in an effort to build a more diverse next generation of aviation professionals. They're doing this through workshops and mentorships and scholarships, which major airlines are only beginning to prioritize. Globally, the 3 major U.S. airlines, United, Delta, and American, have the highest number of female pilots employed. Currently, Alaska Airlines is the only major U.S. airline to make a verbal commitment with Sisters of the Skies to increase the percentage of female African American pilots. MIT economics professor Esther Duflo, one of this year's 3 winners of the Nobel Prize for Economics, is only the second woman to win the prize since its inception in 1969 and the youngest recipient at age 46. Duflo was awarded the prize, along with her husband Abhijit Banerjee and Harvard University professor Michael Kremer, for their work on effective investments for fighting poverty in India and Africa. Duflo said she hoped her win would inspire many other women to continue working, quote, and other men to give them the respect that they deserve, like every single human being, close quote. Approximately a quarter of Navajo women and some infants who were part of a federally funded study on uranium exposure had high levels of the radioactive metal in their systems. This is decades after mining for Cold War weaponry ended on their reservation. Early findings from the University of New Mexico study show that of 781 women screened during an initial phase of the study that ended last year, 26% had concentrations of uranium exceeding levels found in the highest 5% of the U.S. population, and newborns with equally high concentrations continue to be exposed to uranium during their first year. Representative Deb Haaland, the first Native woman in Congress and a former guest on this program, episode 246, if you want to check it out, when she was running for office. Well, she won, and she's now in office as a Democratic representative from New Mexico, and she noted that some of her own family members had lost hearing because of radiation exposure. Her tribal home, Laguna Pueblo, had been the area of one of the world's largest open-pit uranium mines. It, too, closed decades ago, but there seemed to be no funds available, Howland says, to complete the cleanup job. According to the American Trucking Associations, the number of women in the trucking industry has grown by 68% between 2010 and 2018. There are now 234,234 female truckers on U.S. roads and highways. How come? While women represent only 6.6% of the industry's total workforce, there's no gender distinction, you see, when it comes to pay. Other reasons for the increase in female truckers include continued growth in e-commerce, as well as a tight labor market. Okay. 10-4, sister. Hey, alligator on the big slam coming into K-Town, and toward choo-choo bird dogs and grown bears are out tonight. Be safe, those boys out there, bucket mouths, linear lungs, Rambos, and the crotch rockets, some showing off hammer down too hard, and next thing greasy side up. Me, I got the ankle biter along in the cab with me, means more stops at pickle parks and more 10-100s, but nice company, so I'm in the granny lane. Watch out there near Salty, those county mounties can be mean on women hands. I'm off on the back slide now. Catch you on the flip-flop, sister. 10-7. have to take a break here, but Surrealism Corner is coming right up, and then we have a great conversation. And after that, a fighting words that you just might want to quote from. Or not. In any event, at the end of this program, it will be a full lid, so stick around. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we are in the... Wait, are we? Where? Is this place here? Oh, yes, we're in the Surrealism Corner. Wow, it gets more crowded all the time. According to militarytimes.com, a new Pentagon survey for Reserve and National Guard members wants to measure troops' satisfaction with employment, with their workplaces and quality of life issues. But it has a few questions that give pause. Recipients are asked to decide to how much they agree or disagree with the following statements. Many women have a quality of purity that few men possess. Women should be protected and cherished by men. Women seek to gain power by getting control over men. Every man ought to have a woman whom he adores. Military Times writes, alongside questions about the impact of deployment on civilian employment, advancement in pay and benefits, the question seems curious. Well, somebody at militarytimes.com has a gift for understatement. While climate change inflicts suffering in the world's poorest places, in rich places, global warming poses an engineering problem, not an existential one. And it can be addressed, at least temporarily, with staggering amounts of money and a little technology. Take, for example, Doha, Qatar, where it can be 116 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade outside the new Al Janoub soccer stadium, but inside the open-air stadium, a cool breeze blows. Engineer and air conditioning expert Saud Ghani, who designed the system, said this was due to small grates beneath each of the 40,000 seats, grates that push out cool air at ankle level, and since cool air sinks, waves of it roll gently down to the grassy playing field. Vents the size of soccer balls feed more cold air onto the field of Al Janoub. This is one of 8 stadiums that the tiny but fabulously rich Qatar must get in shape for the 2022 World Cup. To survive the summer heat, Qatar not only air-conditions its soccer stadiums, but, wait for it, it air-conditions the outdoors. In markets, along sidewalks, even at outdoor malls, so people can window shop with a cool breeze. Brilliant. A solution that contributes to the problem the solution was devised to solve. Speaking of which, there's Igor and Lev. Oh, Igor, oh, Lev, what charmers you are. Now, you will remember that these are the 2 millionaire-ish Russian bagmen who were picked up for double-dealing, money scandals, Ukraine, oil deals, things, what, with Rudy Giuliani, too many to keep track of, all in the service of Donald Putin, or is it Vladimir Trump? Anyway, Igor and Lev, who look as if Joe Pesci had been cloned and was playing both parts, so deserved to be members of the gang that couldn't shoot straight, and so desirous of it that they misspelled their own false names. on registration sheets while protesting loudly that they really were who their passports claimed they were. This was a top secret op, that they were involved in. You got to understand that. And they were so proud of that that they took lots of selfies with Giuliani, with Don Jr., and at dinner in the White House with Donald Trump. And then they posted them on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Top secret. Oh, Lev, oh, Igor, what would we do without you? From the ridiculous to the sublime, archaeologists have recently constructed the history of clams and people in northwest Canada. The story begins with shells, more than 11,000 years ago, after ice sheets had retreated and opened shoreline habitat to people and to shellfish. Clams flourished on the gravel seabeds that were left in the wake of the glaciers, and over time they lived longer and grew bigger and left larger shells. Archaeologists have concluded that native Canadians discovered clams were good to eat and nutritious as well. I'm positive that it was women who discovered this because women were always going around discovering foods. And anyway, so natives began to harvest the clams regularly around 9,000 years ago. And then, about 3,500 years ago, the Aboriginal Canadians built clam gardens, enclosed rock barriers in the tidal zone. Well, the shellfish thrived under human care and protected circumstances, no rough waves, and they were sheltered from fish and other predators, and they grew larger. Researchers found huge quantities of shells inland. This is how they know the people were devouring them, because the clams were so popular they were frequently collected, and their shells all but disappeared from the water. The gardens were abandoned when the people fled with the arrival of European invaders to British Columbia. Silt from logging settled over the gravel and degraded the habitats that once were so ideal for shellfish. But the ancient gardens might not stay lost. First Nations people are trying to revive clam gardens and other ancestral methods, and scientists predict that this will boost shellfish populations. Nice that we learn about ancient ancestral peoples from clamshell sizes. I wonder if they had citrus trees back then and found that a squeeze or two from a tart lemon was delicious on a fresh clam. Not surreal at all. We have to take another short break, but we'll be back directly with the conversation, proving this week that the pen, or the computer key, is in fact much mightier than the sword. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
If you've ever wondered whether one person can really make any difference, listen up. The conversation this week has as my guest Julie K. Brown, an American investigative journalist with the Miami Herald. She was raised near Philadelphia by a single parent. She left home at age 16 after being editor of her high school paper, and she worked as a courier for a florist and in a lampshade factory to put herself through college, graduating magna cum laude from Temple University with a degree in journalism. Then she worked for the Philadelphia Daily News before joining the Miami Herald. Now, her reporting work there including investigating patterns of abuse in the Florida prison system, prompted a 2018 federal investigation into civil rights abuses in Lowell Correctional Institution in Central Florida. And she's best known for recently reopening the Jeffrey Epstein sexual abuse case with a series of reports published in the Herald in November of 2018. Her series of articles on this not only won journalism prizes and, more importantly, brought a measure of justice to the survivors, but those reports uncovered evidence that escalated previous charges against Epstein from low-level ones to life in prison worthy. They caused the downfall of a cabinet secretary, they changed public consciousness about sex trafficking, and they've been collected under the title Perversion of Justice on social media, where you can find them. The Columbia Journalism Review wrote, "This is what happens when a reporter refuses to give up on a story." Julie Brown, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You are the Journalist of the Year, my dear. I'm so proud that the Women's Media Center will be awarding you a Special Journalism Award on October the 22nd at the Women's Media Awards in New York here, and I get to present it. Yippee, yippee. Congratulations on the investigative journalism that you not only do but have come to personify. In particular, the Jeffrey Epstein outing, that series of articles. Tell us, first of all, what drew you to journalism, because clearly it happened. You got bit with a bug very early. You graduated from Temple with a degree in journalism. So did you always want this?
I think so. I always enjoyed writing, and when I was young, I was was a daughter of a single parent, single mother who worked very hard to support 3 children on her own, and I watched how she was in some ways. How she struggled and how in some ways she was almost persecuted for being a single mother. And I just thought this was incredibly unfair.
Yeah.
A lot of things that happened in my youth, I recognized was a problem with society, in that people who are poorer and who are disadvantaged somehow aren't being listened to.
Yeah.
They don't have a voice. So I think I was driven in part by the fact that I felt that was incredibly unfair, and if there was a way that I could change the world in some way, that perhaps I could do that through journalism.
Well, you certainly have. The Epstein pieces, the series, are incredible. I mean, for people who don't know, I'm going to try very quickly to sum this up, and tell me if I'm leaving something out, please, Julie. But the reopening of the Jeffrey Epstein sexual abuse case is due to this woman, to Julie Brown, because of a series of reports that you wrote and published in the Miami Herald in November of 2018. He had been allowed to plead guilty to only 2 state-level prostitution offenses, even though sex with underage girls was legally rape. And, of course, the guy who allowed this was then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, who struck a deal that made the sex trafficking charges disappear and shut down an FBI probe, etc. And later on became that then U.S. Attorney became Trump's United States Secretary of Labor. What do you know? So he's gone now. Pressure for him to resign after these articles surfaced, and after Epstein was, thanks to these articles, arrested and charged in July of this year. And of course he killed himself in prison, or so we are been given to believe. Julie, the long, lonely work in basically reviving a cold case file. How did this come about? And this took you 2 years, 3 years? What was it?
Well, I had, a lot of journalists had known about this case, and it had been written about before. But I was, at the time, about 2 years ago, covering the women's prison system here in Florida, which is an extremely brutal system here. And I had learned from some of the inmates and former inmates that they had been trafficked. And I thought that I wanted to do something on sex trafficking. And every time I started doing some research, Jeffrey Epstein's name kept coming up over and over again. And every story that I read, I thought, how does this happen? How do you molest, dozens of young underage girls and essentially get away with it? How did this criminal justice system fail so miserably in this case? And I felt that none of the stories that I read really answered those questions. So I was sort of looking at the case on the edges when Alex Acosta got nominated by President Trump to be labor secretary. And that's when I thought, let's see what happens. I thought this is going to all come out. He's not going to be confirmed.
Interesting.
And that's not what happened at all. He was confirmed. He was barely questioned about the case.
Yeah.
And I decided at that time that I needed to, I knew by then these victims are now in their late 20s, early 30s. And I thought, I wonder what they think about this. I wonder what they think about him, Alex Acosta, taking over an agency that has oversight of human trafficking, child labor laws, and just basically some of the structures in our society that are supposed to protect people like these underage girls were.
Yeah, it's another Trump appointment of, getting the fox to guard the hen coop or whatever, which he has done again and again and again and again. But this is particularly horrific. So you decided to do something about it as an investigative journalist. And how long did it take you, the tracking down of this?
Well, it took a lot longer than I expected because as I began to look at some of the files, I realized that, these women were girls when it happened. So there was Jane Doe number 1, Jane Doe number 2, all the way up to Jane Doe 140. I mean, there were...
My God.
All these girls were never identified. So it took me quite a while to get a list together and find out who they were. So I would say part of the investigation was just finding out who the victims were, tracking them down. And once I realized who they were and where they were now, I already realized this was a big story because, you look at their histories and they had drug addiction, they were in prison, they were victims of domestic abuse, a couple of them had died. So you could see with most of these victims, their lives had not gone very well. Yeah. And I thought, this is even a story right there. This is where they are now. Where are they now kind of thing.
Right.
And from that point on, as I started reading more and more and more, because there was, since this happened, it was a decade-old case, there were a lot of court filings, and I realized I had to go through them. And in reading them, I realized how badly the criminal justice system had failed these girls.
I mean, I realize that movies like All the President's Men, movies about journalism, well, I'm very glad that they're made because that's the only way that the general public even glimpses the work that goes into real journalism. But they, of course, always glamorize it, and there are, in the case of All the President's Men, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, nonetheless, it's a buddy film. And here you were, a woman, in what is still a male-dominated field, less so, but still. And you had no Woodward or no Bernstein. I mean, you in other words, it was just Julie Brown, and a lot of footwork and a lot of poring over documents until 3 or 4 in the morning. And I don't think the public understands what really goes into investigative journalism, that it is not all glamour, that in fact so much of it is, and she persisted, which defines you.
Right. I would like to add, however, though, that my videographer, Emily Michaud, who had done the prison series with me and we had put together a documentary on the women in Lowell, which was the largest women's prison in the country at the time we did the series. We partnered in essence for this. I did all the research and the grunge work, so to speak, in that respect. But she was critical because she went on those interviews with those victims with me, and it's very important to have a videographer or a photographer with you that really understands investigative journalism. And
Yes.
not all photographers and videographers do understand investigative journalism. So she was a very critical piece of this project as well.
And in particular, in this case, be sensitive to the sensitivities.
That's right. That's right. Because we were dealing with not only, the fact that this had happened to them decades ago, the possibility, very real possibility that you're going to re-traumatize these women.
That's right.
We certainly did want to do that. So we did take care, and I did do some homework on how to approach them, given the fact that, we did not want to re-traumatize them and cause them even more pain, especially, years later when some of them had buried it or they had found a way to cope with it. Not all of them were in that category, but certainly you don't want to stir up all that trauma.
No, of course. And I'm sure some of them had simply not spoken of it for decades.
That's right. Some of them had never even told their closest
of course.
Family members or their husbands, you know?
I'm afraid that's fairly standard about abuse cases where the woman is somehow made to think that it was all her fault. So this kind of sensitivity, but you've shown this kind of sensitivity before. You won in 2014 a George Polk Award for Cruel and Unusual, the series of articles you wrote on the sometimes fatal mistreatment of Florida prison inmates with mental illnesses. So you have a history of looking toward the unvoiced, the deliberately kept unvoiced, and being their voice. And I thank you for it. It's an amazing, and particularly when they're women who are doubly, triply unvoiced, and usually women of color institutionalized.
Right.
There's a triple. So they're poor, they're female, they're of color. And there's just there's no speaking, and if there is, they won't be heard. So why should I try? Is the feeling, and you come with the mightiest of weapons, with the pen. And are you thrilled when you get the story? Is there a moment of oh my God, I'm onto something really big here, or are you? Yeah.
I think so. When Emily and I went for the very first interview, it was a woman that lived outside of Nashville. And we went, she worked in her little family diner, and we sat there speaking to her. She was our very first woman that was willing to talk to us on camera. And it was very powerful and very emotional. And we left that interview just in silence. We're usually chatty after we have a good interview, but we were just completely silent. We were just lost in our thoughts, and I think just, in a mode where we realized this was going to be a big story, and we were, as I said, pretty quiet. And then I got a phone call from the woman, Michelle Licata. We were in the car driving back to the airport, and she said, "I just have to tell you, I feel better than I have felt in years.
Oh.
I needed so much to tell somebody that story, somebody that I know understood where we were coming from, because nobody really understands what we went through."
Oh, my God.
So I think at that moment, we realized we were going to tell a story that was really important, and we knew that this was going to be.
It's those moments that you really realize that this is really worthwhile. What I'm doing, this makes a difference. This helps,
Right.
And the courage that these women had to come forward had to do also with the fact that they saw, sensed, and felt a ready ear. In you and the videographer. What is the videographer's name again?
Emily Michelle.
Emily Michelle. Both of you, and that that this was an all-woman crew, I think really made a difference, because women speak more freely about such indelible and tragic experiences in the company of other women. So you had that going for you, even if it brought you the ire congratulations again, of Alan Dershowitz. Tell, my favorite,
I'm his favorite person.
Well, that, my dear, that comes as such a compliment. I mean, I hope you know it's a rare and wonderful treat. Tell that story. It's amazing.
Well, this story was not in any way about Alan Dershowitz. He was very much on the periphery of this story because the focus was on the women, the victims, and it was also on the failure of the people in power at the time, which was Alex Acosta, the federal prosecutors, the FBI, the state prosecutors, the judges who also agreed to seal a lot of things to keep it secret. So the focus was on that. However, you can't ignore history, and part of the history of this story is that one of these women had accused him and continues to stand by her story that she was directed by Epstein to have sex with Alan Dershowitz, not once, but several times.
And Dershowitz was one of Epstein's lawyers during the criminal investigation.
Right. That's right.
For 2 years, yeah.
Right. And he helped orchestrate, he was part of the team that orchestrated this extraordinarily lenient plea deal that he got. Yeah, and Dershowitz helped with that.
He stayed in prison at night and went to his offices in the daytime. Yeah,
right.
Terrific. Nice work if you can get it. Go on.
So it is relevant to mention the fact, needless to say, that one of his lawyers, by the way, had been accused of being involved in this time because she signed a sworn affidavit. She had been out there saying that this had happened to her, and there were a lot of lawsuits. There was a lot of court documents that I could base my story on, saying that Mr. Dershowitz was accused. So I mentioned it in the story, and he sort of went crazy, and made it into this big thing. And he felt, I think, that one of the ways to fight back was to try to discredit me. And so he sort of went on, Twitter and social media and went to events and just basically tried to discredit me and really try to bully me and Virginia Roberts, who's the woman that has accused me.
Yes, but he also used his celebrity to pressure the Pulitzer Prize Committee to shut you out and to shut the Miami Herald out for that reporting. And because he was famous and made a lot of noise and is a generally odious creature, I guess the Pulitzers caved and didn't want to deal with the whole thing. And that's...
Well, I don't think that the Pulitzers were swayed by Alan Dershowitz. I can tell you that. I just don't think so. Pulitzers are, a group of really august journalists that are accustomed to that kind of pressure. So I personally don't think that had anything to do with it.
Well, you are a very generous soul. I am not. Periodically I let my lower self out to have a run in the park. And when Alan Dershowitz's name is mentioned, my lower self is having a fine old time and a great run. He has really been a problem on almost every issue I can think of, most notoriously about women for a long time. So it's a mark of honor. Another mark of honor on your chart that you've been attacked by him, unpleasant as that may have been. I do want to touch on one thing because I think it's so important, and you're the person to ask about it. The terrible pressure on local newspapers, financially and every other way, to shut down or be bought out by large, often right-wing chains, and what that does to journalism. Now, the Miami Herald is a very distinguished and well-known, in a sense, national paper, but it is nonetheless, in another sense, a local paper, a big local paper, but the smaller ones are just getting swallowed alive. Talk a little bit about that and why local press, because Epstein had a home in Florida, and that, in a sense, is where this began, is so important.
Well, one of the heartening things that came out of this series, I think, for me, And, something that I really didn't expect at all when I went into this project was that the response from the public as far as investigative journalism. I received so many emails, letters, flowers, just tons of people from all over the country writing me and saying, praising and that their support for investigative journalism. And a lot of people subscribed as a result of that. But what I told everybody is really the important thing for people to understand is that there are journalists in your town, in almost every region, if not community, that are trying to do the same thing that I'm doing, trying to expose things, corrupt people, where your money's going, where it's not supposed to go, those kinds of things. And the best thing that people can do to support those kinds of stories is to subscribe to your local newspaper. And a lot of people think, oh, it's a lot of money. You can get a digital subscription now, pretty reasonable, of almost any newspaper in America. It does not cost all that much money.
That's right.
And I always tell people, well, how much is your cable bill? You're spending all this time watching CNN, MSNBC, all those stations. Your cable bill is $200. You can't afford $10 a month for your local newspaper. I mean, you should be subscribing to your local newspaper. Really, democracy depends on your local. It starts at the local level.
It does.
It's just essentially really important for people to understand how the local journalists, just like me, are working really hard to get at the truth.
Yes, it is so important. And in fact, the irony is that cable television, even the stars on cable television, who are terrific, like Rachel Maddow, what they're doing is actually interviewing print journalists for stories that have been broken in print journalism, just at a time when everybody was saying, oh, well, print journalism is done, finished, over, wash your hands of it. That's where the stories have been coming from. That's where the stories that will eventually and have eventually led to the inevitability of Trump's impeachment came from. That's where the major stories have broken always and still are breaking in print journalism, and often, as you say, at the local level. So if we don't support that, we have no democracy. I mean, I can't imagine a Julie K. Brown being permitted to quietly follow a story while doing other things at the same time for 2 years about a case that seemed pretty much washed up on cable television. That's not the pace at which they move. So you can go fast, but you can't go deep. And you, my dear, are a deep goer. Thank you, Julie, for everything you write, and congratulations on finally being recognized for that, and hopefully that will extend to other local journalists who do such fine work as you do. And I will so look forward to seeing you on October 22nd at the Women's Media Awards and presenting you with the Women's Media Center Special Journalism Award. Thank you, and thanks for being with us today.
Thanks.
Time for one last pause, and then we'll return with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Sometimes fighting words can be confessional. At the same time, they're confrontational. Now that we start to barely glimpse possible exits from these 9 circles of Trump we've been treading for an eternity of 3 years, I began to realize that I have political PTSD. Probably we all do, and if we don't yet, we will. In my case, this has left me so disoriented that at different times I have actually been glad that Mitt Romney said, well, anything, and that Ivanka went skiing instead of talking about women's rights. I was relieved that generals were running the White House, thankful that Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts was a closet liberal when he is so not. And I actually felt a wave of warmth for the hawk with a handlebar mustache John Bolton on retroactively learning that one reason he quit Trump World was his opposition to selling out the Kurds to ensure safety for Trump Towers in Istanbul. Not to speak of news that is never not breaking anymore. News falls in continual crashes, shattering any second of pretense of normality that I can construct, which is almost never. Also, not to speak of the sole consistency emanating from the United States government, instantly shifting claims that whatever was just said was not, that we've won what we lost, and that the moon is made of cheese after all. But white cheese, because green reminds people of the new Green Deal, and we certainly don't want to think about anything as sensible as that. By the end of each day, my disorientation has intensified to vertigo. Now that more than half the citizenry wants Trump impeached and removed from office, and that number grows every day, his already frantic insecurity drives him to make more mistakes than did his everyday habit. As usual, his courtiers and followers imitate their boss. "Look what beautiful clothes the emperor is wearing," they sing reverently, averting their eyes from his naked flab and his pompadour comb-over. His minions fight among themselves and then leak to the world. His chief of staff gives a press conference to admit the boss committed crimes and then snaps, "Get over it," then within hours has to deny he said that just before his boss readmits it while denying he's doing that before our eyes. Is it a readmission of a denial or a denial of a readmission? It's a hailstorm of miscalculations, errors, mistakes, gaffes, lute and mouth disease, and flat-out catastrophes. Doubling down and walking it back have replaced stretches and crunches as daily exercises. That itself is a problem for me, and that problem is a problem. See, I'm conflicted about excellence with this gang. Excellence, I hear you say? What excellence? Where is any excellence in all this? Precisely. I mean, I value at least the striving for excellence. I'm a sucker for the well-wrought urn. A half-second pause here for English majors to smile. Think, then, how maddening it is to me to be forced to witness not only venality, but banality. Not just crime, but insultingly disorganized crime. You know, you don't catch professionals royally screwing up everything from hiring and firing staff, through threats and bribery as foreign policy, to killing people by enabling ethnic cleansing. That is epic, Olympic medal level incompetence. Lev and Igor, for example, would never get to be made men. No self-respecting mafioso would be caught, dead, posing for pictures with their capo while carrying out a hush-hush job for him, and then posting those photos online. Such ineptitude would give Michael Corleone a migraine he would never let them forget. Not to dwell on a foreign non-policy that turns us into an Axis power left over from World War II. Speaking of which, I have to say this for the Nazis. Not only did they have smart-looking uniforms, but they were decidedly efficient. Hideously, horrifically efficient. And then I think, what? Am I now so disoriented as to feel anything but celebratory about the champion inefficiency of this sociopathic crew of people who put children in cages and parents in jail, but then, when that turns out to look bad, can't for the life of themselves figure out which child belongs with whom to reunite them? These are all educated people, but educated in what? Even the highest provable intellect does not guarantee a capacity for empathy or a clear, penetrating vision. But a lack of empathy, combined with willful stupidity, is an awesome thing to behold. This will pass. The passing has finally begun. though it will take years, even decades, and in some cases generations, to repair the damage these 3 years have inflicted on this country and this world. But it will pass. Entire libraries will be written about it with perspective, parsing who was really ignorant pretending to be smart in the regime and who was doing the reverse. We who are living through these times, or trying to, and those unable to do so through no fault of their own, needed and will continue to need to keep enduring, keep fighting back, keep believing in a future already wounded, but not non-existent. And personally, I'd rather feel disoriented in such a time than adjusted to it. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. We'll be off next week, busy with the Women's Media Awards, but you can follow those happenings through the media itself, online and at womensmediacenter.com. Very exciting. And you can follow me at the Robin Morgan on Twitter, Facebook, and now on Instagram. You can check out my words online at blog@robinmorgan.net and find my latest book, Dark Matter, wherever books are sold. And you can no longer pre-order. You can actually straight out find my new novel, just been published, Parallax, also wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.